So this is a 1958 Morris Minor Ute, or LCV light commercial vehicle as most people in the UK would know it. I only just bought this car. I know absolutely nothing about it other than the previous owner had it for about 20 years and never did anything with it. I've had it back home now for a couple of days. I just went around and bolted some of the loose panels back on, really just to get them out of the way. But I figured that I would have a look and see what condition this engine's in. It turns out that it's matching numbers, but I have absolutely no idea what situation is with it. So the first thing that I've actually done, it didn't occur to me to turn the camera on before I started doing all these things. Ignore those valves, they're for a rover. Was I just tried to get the engine start cranking over. It turns over freely, but this starter motor, which is the original one on the engine, just didn't seem to have the guts to spin it over. It wouldn't even get over the first compression. So, I mean, at least that's a positive that the engine has compression. The car came with that starter motor down there that I've already popped on. And I tried again and got the same result, but what I noticed was I was getting a little bit of a spark coming from basically down the back here, where the starter motor at the back of the housing, and I've realised that there is no earth strap on the engine. So I'm thinking that the reason it's having cranking issues is because it's got a bad earth system. So for the purposes of temporarily trying to sort things out, I've just literally shoved a jumper lead across so it makes sure that it'll actually be able to crank over. So I guess what I'll do, maybe we'll just get a little bit of fuel. I've pulled that fuel pipe off there, get a little bit of fuel into the float bowl. I'll check to see if it's got any spark, which, I mean, who knows? Those points have been in there for who knows how long. But I'll see if it's got any spark. If it does, we can get some fuel in and see whether or not it'll have any chance of even coughing to life. Okay, so I fought to get the cap off. And as you can see in there, it's pretty clean. The points, no, that's not really focusing well for you, but those points don't seem too bad. I guess what we'll need to do is get some power to the coil and see whether we can get some spark happening. I might just leave those alone as they are for the moment. The next thing that I started to look into was, you know, what situation is the wiring in, and I've just connected up that battery there, and I've already got power to the coil. And the reason that's a little bit odd is because nothing connected inside, and I don't even have an ignition key. Yet all these lights are on, so I don't know what is going on. Obviously a short somewhere in the system, but that looks to me like it's probably what, oil and ignition lights, I guess. I don't know how the ignition's turned on, but anyway. So I guess what we'll do, cap's back on, is I'll turn that light off and just see whether we've got any spark. Well, if I didn't know any better, I'd say that just tried to start. And there was definitely a spark. I don't know whether the video caught it or not. Definitely a spark. The question, why did it start? Well, when I pulled that fuel hose off, there was a little bit of a smell of fuel, which again is weird because there's no fuel tank in the car. When I very first connected the battery, that pump did actually try to pump, so I disconnected it. So I guess I'll put some leads back on. I might just drop some fuel down into that bowl, and I have a funny feeling that this is going to start, which is not bad for the first time in at least 20 years. So I apologise for all the little bits of editing here, mostly because I don't have a tripod or anything to hold this camera, and I really wasn't planning on videoing this, but stupid me just realised the reason I think that's tried to fire is because the day I got it home and put some power to the car, one of the first things I did was to see whether that pump would actually start pumping. So all I'd done was stuck a temporary can on the end, not that you can see it, but the metal fuel line that goes down the back. There is no tank in the back here. Well, there is. That's it there. And as I mentioned earlier, the pump did try and pump, so presumably it must have pumped a little bit of fuel up into that float bowl. That's the only reason I could think it could possibly have tried to start. The previous owner, as I said, has had the car for 20 years and didn't do anything to it other than get all these guards blasted. He's a self-confessed non-car person, has no idea mechanically, and in the time I spent with him over a couple of days collecting everything, I don't doubt that to be the case. I can't believe that this has got ignition with nothing being done to it. The car has been dry stored, so maybe that's helped. But what I've done, I just, with that fuel pipe there, just got that little bottle of fuel. The fuel pipe's not in very good condition, so all I've done is just run a little bit of fuel down to hopefully fill that fuel bowl up. And I guess we can see whether it will start. I might just have to try and prop the camera up somewhere so that I can do everything, because I'm just going to hit the starter solenoid button there to get it to crank. And also there's no choke cable attached down here. The accelerator is, but there's no choke cable attached. So I'll just pull that choke on manually down the bottom just there. And well, I guess we'll see what happens. Okay, I've got you sitting precariously in a drawer of my toolbox, so hopefully you don't fall off. Fingers crossed, let's see what happens. So that was a little bit of a draw there, so obviously that ignition's working. Let's see how we go. I can't believe that's so easy. That's crazy. Obviously there's no exhaust, so both of those lights have gone out, so I'm only assuming that that's oil pressure and ignition. That's mad. I might just get a multimeter, turn it off, get a multimeter and just see if it's charging. Hang on. Okay, so those lights are back on again. The battery's showing 12.6, so let's just try that again. Maybe charging, but it's not doing very much. Those lights are out again. I'm thinking possibly because that fan belt is way too loose. I can't believe this thing is actually going. This is crazy, listen. Obviously charging a little bit. I'd say I call that a win. So there's two things that I thought I'm going to probably do, maybe three if I can be bothered. I just noticed before that I mentioned that fan belt was really loose and the generator was actually not tight. So I've pulled that up tight and tightened up the clamp down the bottom there. So I thought I might just start it again quickly, see whether it does actually charge more than I showed just before. And then when that's done, I think now that the starters are spinning the engine over pretty well, that I'll pull those plugs out and do a compression test to try and find out what condition this motor's in. I could pull the low oil pressure light switch from down the back there and put a gauge on, just to give an idea of what the oil pressure in the engine's like, and therefore give me some idea of what the bearings are like as well. But it runs so quietly, it's crazy. Anyway, we'll start it and see if we get any difference in that battery charging. Looks like we run out of fuel in the float bowl. We'll just fill that up. Okay, we'll try that again. Well, this just gets better and better. I'd actually planned on having to do a full rebuild on this engine, but I'm just not convinced. So I think maybe I'll have a look at the compressions. Just a note on that, when I first started to try and see whether, I manually turned it over free to make sure that it wasn't seized, and the starter motor wouldn't turn over. With that earthing problem, the starter couldn't even turn the engine over on one cylinder compression with the compression gauge on number 1. So I guess we'll pull those plugs out and see how it goes now. Okay, so I don't have enough hands to film this and show you as I'm actually doing it. What I have done, just so I don't confuse myself, the car is still set up and running as a positive earth, so I've changed the jumper lead around for that engine earth, just so I don't confuse myself. So I'm obviously using what would be the negative, and I'm actually going straight down to the starter motor down there because I can't work out how to connect the battery. I can't get the ignition disconnected or turned off, so I obviously don't want the coil. I don't really want to pull the coil wiring off. This is the quickest and easiest way to do it. So that's the first cylinder, number 1. That's 150. That's very surprising. Let's see what the next one is. All right, I'm going to try and see if I can film this at the same time as doing it. So let's see what number 2 gives us. Same again. Give me a second and I'll swap over to number 3. Okay, so number 3. Let's see what happens. And again, this is too good to be true. Hang on a second, I'll go to number 4. And number 4's in, so on the gauge, let's see what happens. So that battery sounds like it's getting a bit low, and that's only 125. I wonder if that's just the battery. Okay, well, we'll give it another go. I've given that battery a little bit of time to catch up and see what happens. No, still not coming up any higher, and yes, that battery is still a little bit low. Most people you'll see doing compression tests will tell you you really should have the throttle held open, which I don't. So it's not the ideal scenario, but I'm not going to complain about those compression figures of 150 across, and then it's actually the second one. I think that's about 130, something like that. Like I said, I know nothing about this engine, so look, it could be a bit down in the back. I could probably do a leak down test. No cooling systems. I have no idea whether it's got a head gasket problem or, you know, maybe even some valve issues. The decision really is how far, if at all, to pull this apart as part of the restoration of this car. But hopefully you've enjoyed watching this come back to life. I'm really amazed that it has. It's far too easy, but as they like to say, it is what it is. I think the last thing that I'll do today in this video, I wasn't sure whether I was going to, but curiosity's got the better of me, is just connect up this external oil pressure gauge. It's nothing fancy, but it'll do the job. It just means that the oil pressure switch, which is, try and zoom in, that one there with the green wire going to it, I have to get that out. It is very hard to get out with a normal spanner because the distributor clamp and the oil filter feed coming off the side of the block get in the way. So I'll get that pulled out, put the gauge on, and then we'll see what sort of oil pressure we get. So I guess the summary for this engine is that it's in surprisingly good condition. That oil pressure is not the highest that you could see. I have another Morris that's got new engine in it, and that's running about 70 pounds when it's cold. But I think 50 and 60 is not to be sneezed at, and at the moment I can't see any real reason to rip this thing to bits. As you can see, the car does need a lot of work. But I will look at covering that in future videos if people are interested. Some of you may have noticed in the background there are other cars in the shed. It's a case of why have one Morris Minor Ute when you can have more? And that is the other one. I hadn't intended on buying it because this particular car is a very early car. We're still just trying to work with the LCV register in the UK to identify it, but for those of you who know your Morrises, this is a very early dashboard that came originally in the MM series before they went to the Central Speedo. So once I know what year this is and we can sort it all out, it too needs work. I don't know for certain that this car was originally a Ute. I believe it may have been a panel van. Again, once we dig up all the information, we'll know. I do have the van back for it, but it's unfortunately been butchered and chopped in half. So depending on how we go with videos and what we do next, I may feature a bit of a review on this one as well. So thanks for watching so far. If you're interested, there are plenty of other things in the shed that distract me. I may be quite happy to do some more videos on the different cars. The Utes are going to take quite some time to get done, so it's going to be a long bunch of installment videos if anyone wants to watch. Thanks for now.